Witnessing the incoming attack, Cao Cao decided to disengage first and raised her shield to block. With a swift move, she blocked all of the 3 arrows flying towards her, rendering the archer's attack ineffective. She then used the charge skill once again and maneuvered towards the enemy team's backline, which caught them off guard. As the female knight captain retaliated, employing her own taunt skill to divert Cao Cao's focus, the enemy mage began casting a powerful fireball spell. Just as the spell was nearing completion, the knight captain remembered the assassin in Cao Cao's team and shouted a warning to the team to be careful. The archer activated his eagle eye skill, quickly spotting Yi Yi in her stealth state right behind the mage, just as he was about to yell out a warning, but it was too late. Yi Yi's sneak attack was successful, not only interrupting the mage's casting, but also delivering a fatal blow to the mage's back with one of her daggers and another to the neck. However, protected by the arena's magical barrier, the mage was not killed, rather was teleported out of the arena upon receiving the fatal blow. As it turned out, the magical barrier will safeguard them from actual death. With the mage defeated and teleported out, the situation looked dire for the opposing team. Yi Yi and Cao Cao pressed their advantage, targeting the enemy's support and healer. Yi Yi quickly eliminated her target with a fatal strike, while Cao Cao used her charge skill once more, knocking another opponent out of the arena. Lin watched everything unfold, then nodded approvingly. He observed that although his team was at a clear disadvantage in terms of strength, numbers, and level, the opposing team's lack of combat experience against human professionals was also very evident. They had likely never fought against a team of human professionals before, seeing everything going very one-sided. Perhaps his team doesn't need him this round. However, without Lin in the action, this also leads to a sense of disappointment among the spectators. Many had anticipated Lin, wanting to witness what the necromancer profession can do firsthand. Many of the spectators had never expected that his team could win the match with only 4 against 5, causing the spectators to wonder if the opposing team was really that weak. However, some spectators also noticed that Lin's team clearly had a better strategy, which resulted in a one-sided match. Not long after, the team was jubilant with their victory, with Yi Yi waving cheerfully at Lin as she approached him. Lin smiled and nodded in approval. Cao Cao and Oliver, though slightly out of breath, were visibly excited about their win. However, they didn't get ahead of themselves, fully aware that the upcoming matches would only feature tougher opponents, and they would be increasingly reliant on Lin. Lin wasn't particularly concerned about who their future opponents would be. He was confident to win against anyone going up against him. After the match, the team celebrated their victory at a restaurant before returning to rest, concluding the first day of competition. The next day swiftly arrived, and once again, the spectator seats were filled to capacity. This time, their opponents were much stronger, all level 28 and 29 professionals, comprising a gladiator, a sharpshooter, an elder, an elemental mage, and a summoner. Surprisingly, they were all rare professions. From the look, it appeared that they were very confident, and clearly didn't think their opponent for this round would stir any problems for them. The gladiator, likely the captain of the team, noted that aside from Lin and Yi Yi, the rest were around level 20, with the highest being only level 27. He laughed mockingly, suggesting their previous win might have been due to their opponent's forfeiting. The mockery from the opposing team elicited laughter from them. As the jokes settled, they didn't let their guard down, and soon the mood shifted as they were prepared for battle. Shortly after the summoner on the team began to summon his creature, no other than a shadow beast wreathed in dark mists growling as it stood beside its master. This was quickly recognized by Yi Yi as a summoned creature particularly challenging for assassin-type professions due to its ability to be stealthy and possess the ability to see through stealth. Cao Cao's expression also turned serious. Clearly, their opponents were no joke this time. As the referee announced the start of the match, the opposing team's confidence seemed unshakable, with the gladiator leading the charge, buffs already applied by their support, and the elemental mage activating a magical shield. The shadow beast advanced stealthily, primarily focusing on Yi Yi. She realized that the shadow beast was a big threat, potentially tying her down and leaving her teammates vulnerable. Oliver had already applied buffs to the team, and the two teams quickly got into a standoff, with Emma consulting Cao Cao on what they should do next. They figured that without a knight on the opposing team and no apparent offensive moves, their previous tactics against their first-round opponent seemed ineffective. Tao Tao looked quite uncertain and decided to adapt as the match progressed, knowing too well that Lin had their backs. The opposing gladiator, eyeing Lin, who appeared nonchalant with his hands in his pockets, took Lin's calmness as underestimating them. When the gladiator initiated an attack, Tao Tao instructed the team to scatter. Oliver and Emma quickly retreated a couple of steps. In the next second, the gladiator's sword swiped through the air, sending a cross-shaped sword wave toward Tao Tao. Quickly, Tao Tao, raising her shield to block, felt the impact, which numbed her arms but managed to withstand the attack. However, the gladiator's relentless assault quickly put her at a disadvantage, despite her attempts to counter. Meanwhile, Emma kept casting spells trying to keep up with the healing, while Yi Yi vanished from sight, closely followed by the Shadow Beast. Seizing an opportunity, Yi Yi landed a hit on the summoner's creature. Unfortunately, it wasn't fatal, and the creature's health began to regenerate. As it turned out, the summoner also possessed a skill that was able to heal his summoned creature. Just as the situation looked as dire as it could be, the next moment, the elemental mage had finished casting her spell, which targeted Emma and Oliver with a meteor fall in the back line. Emma, in the midst of casting a healing spell for Tao Tao, couldn't dodge in time. Oliver, prioritizing Emma's importance as the healer over his own safety, pushed her aside and took the full brunt of the attack, which resulting him getting knocked out of the arena. Oliver believed that his buffs had already been applied, and that Emma's role as a healer was crucial for the team's sustainability. However, shortly after Oliver's elimination, the mage turned his attention to Emma. Unfortunately, she too was hit and eliminated from the match. With the support and healer both out, the gladiator mockingly suggested Tao Tao surrender to avoid the pain of defeat. Although no real death would occur in the arena, the pain was still real. Tao Tao, recognizing the dire situation, shifted her strategy from defense to offense. She used her shield to repel the gladiator, breaking his rhythm and creating an opening for herself. Then, using her charge skill, and aimed for the enemy's backline. However, the elemental mage remained composed and cast the mage's exclusive skill, Fire Repulse Ring, just as Tao Tao approached. A ring of fire erupted, forcefully repelling Tao Tao and sending her flying back several meters, landing just beside Lin. Breathing heavily, Tao Tao looked towards Lin with a gentle smile and said, "It's up to you now." Lin gave her a reassuring nod while telling her, 5 people, 5 seconds. The three looked at each other and smiled. Tao Tao and Yi Yi gave Lin a high five before stepping down from the stage. Nonetheless, there's only Lin and the full team of 5 remained on the stage. However, seeing what was happening only made the spectators more excited. Finally, get a chance to witness the Necromancer in action. Not gonna lie, but I think we were also looking forward to it, having waited almost 2 weeks to see this moment. Anyway, all eyes are on Lin, curious to see if he is really that powerful. At the same time, there were many who also believed that it was impossible for him to take on 5 opponents all by himself. Either way, they were all excited to see him in action. On the stage, the gladiator leaned on his sword nonchalantly, while the others on his team looked at Lin with smug smiles, perhaps already thinking they had already won. In the gladiator's eyes, since Lin's teammates had surrendered, did he really think he could turn the tide alone? Or did he simply underestimating them? To his surprise, Lin simply shook his head with a smile and pondered for a moment, perhaps thinking how many skeletons he would need. Seconds later, he then raised his hand to summon forth a skeleton. A skeletal mage slowly ascended from the ground and appeared beside him, surrounded by chilling frost and ice particles, revealing itself to be a water-type skeletal mage. One of the mushroom-headed shorties on the other team immediately recognized the summon as an undead creature. Just as he expected, Lin was also a summoner type of profession. However, what puzzled him was why Lin waited until his teammates had left the arena before making his move. The gladiator burst into laughter, asking the same question, clearly not considering the skeletal mage a threat. They didn't even bother using detection spells to check on the attribute of the skeletal mage, but even if they had, they would have only seen its attributes before Lin's amplified talent was applied. Within seconds, the skeletal mage raised its staff and used the skill, Ice Storm. The temperature in the arena suddenly dropped, and what followed was ice spikes that fell like raindrops. But from the look, the gladiator didn't seem to be worried whatsoever, perhaps not taking Lin seriously. However, in the blink of an eye, his expression changed dramatically, and he screamed out loud. He called out to the healer on the team, "Quick, heal me!" He had never expected just a single ice spike that only happened to scrape him could severely injure him. He coughed up a mouthful of blood and knelt on the arena floor. He tried his best to not pass out from the pain. However, he waited and waited. No one had cast a healing spell on him. He suddenly thought of something. When he looked back, he was terrified to see that he was the only one left on his team. All 4 of his teammates were no longer on the stage. His pupils shrank, and gulping hard with cold sweat streaming down his face, he looked at Lin in disbelief. He could never have imagined that a simple summoned creature could eliminate his team with a single spell, especially under the protection of a mage's magical barrier. What kind of summoned creature was this, and why was its skill so powerful? That was the only thing he could think about. Meanwhile, his teammates didn't even feel the pain. By the time they regained their senses, they had already been teleported below the arena. All 4 were clueless about what had happened, finding themselves eliminated in the blink of an eye. But it seemed like they had been attacked by that skeleton. When their focus returned to the stage, the skeletal mage was about to cast its skill for the second time. The gladiator already knew the outcome and didn't even attempt to dodge. Several ice spikes shot toward him, and the next second, he lost consciousness, causing an uproar among the audience. Countless people jumped up in disbelief after witnessing this scene. Lin's skeletal mage shocked everyone. A single summoned creature had easily wiped out a 5-man team. Oof, that's only one of them. They didn't get to see Lin's entire skeletal army yet. Anyway, not only the audience at the arena, but also those watching the live broadcast at home stood up in shock as well. It was the first time they heard about this necromancer profession, and likely will remember it for the rest of their lives. It was also then everyone realized why Lin didn't make a move sooner. If he did, his teammates wouldn't have needed to do anything. A lot of them were already worried about the contestants who would face Lin in the individual matches later on. Lin's friends began to discuss the situation with smiles on their faces below the stage. Tao Tao believed that with their strength, they had done about as much as they could. For the upcoming team matches, it seems like they would have to leave everything to Lin now. Oliver and Emma both raised their hands in agreement. Although the 4 of them are quite strong, having won the first match on their own, however, their levels were still a bit too low compared to the rest of the contestants, and the teams they would face were only going to get stronger later on. Lin had no objections, just smiling and nodding. After celebrating for a while, the day quickly passed, and the professional competition moved into its 3rd day. This time, they didn't make any plans because as long as Lin was there, nothing was a problem. Tao Tao and the others stepped back several meters, and at the moment the match started, they all jumped off the stage together, clearing the space for Lin. Clearly, Lin was to face a 5-on-1 situation again. The opposing team, all students from Xiajing Academy, had a wry look on their faces. They turned to their team captain, asking what to do. The captain spoke righteously, reminding them who had led them through the tyrant desert dungeon that had stumped them for months, helping them complete the academy's mission so they could make it this far. Turned out that these students had all gotten carried by Lin before, and they were all grateful to Lin. They knew to fight him seemed like a joke. After the match started, both sides fell into an odd silence. The 5 of them seemed to have no intention of preparing to fight, and soon took several steps forward, bowing 90 degrees, then saluting Lin and wishing him victory. They then jumped off the stage, conceding the match. Their voices were loud enough for all the spectators to hear clearly, leaving Lin speechless. Witnessing this, Lin's friends chuckled, not really surprised, especially since every student from Xiajing Academy knew how strong Lin was. However, the audience, unaware of these connections and having traveled far and paid for tickets, naturally felt displeased by the concession. Yet, many also expressed understanding, recalling the terror of Lin's skeletal mage from the day before. Who would dare to fight him? Back to White Divine's small courtyard. He and Mang Anwen were both paying attention to Lin's matches. Mang Anwen, with his eyes closed, pondered for a moment before asking White Divine if it was really good for Lin to be so high profile. White Divine disagreed, seeing no issue with it. He believed letting the world know that Lin was not to be trifled with was a testament to being a good disciple of him. Mang Anwen, however, didn't fully agree with his view, and even worried that being too conspicuous could attract enemies. After all, Lin was still young, and there are people out there who might not hesitate to target an emerging prodigy like Lin. White Divine understood Mang Anwen's concerns, but scoffed, saying he was actually hoping for those bastards to make a move. After all, their provocations in the past had not provided White Divine with enough leverage or evidence to act against them. Should they dare to make a move, White Divine promised to teach them what real pain was. Meng Anwen's eyes flashed with a killing intent, realizing it was White Divine's intention to have Lin act so conspicuously. It turned out White Divine and Lin had discussed this before. Their nation's talents in recent years had been targeted and killed at a young age, and while they all knew who was responsible, they lacked evidence. They couldn't let those deaths be in vain. Upon learning this, Lin had agreed without hesitation to serve as bait. White Divine also tells Meng Anwen that he heard the old man was also planning to use Mohan as bait to draw out the hidden powers. Meng Anwen massaged his eyebrows, murmuring while saying a necromancer with infinite potential and possibilities, and a holy blade dancer who had gone through the profession elevation, were indeed good baits. He then noted how coincidence it was that both just happened to be siblings as well. He wondered how many people out there envied their talents. White Divine laughed heartily, but looked afar with a terrifying gaze, assuring Meng Anwen he would never let anything happen to the siblings. Meng Anwen, also looking into the distance with his pupils briefly turning red before returning to normal, murmured about not having killed anyone in a long time, and that it was time to get some exercise. The two released killing intent filled the small courtyard as the temperature plummeted. The day quickly went by, and the professional competition entered its fourth day. The teams that had made it this far were undoubtedly very strong, and Lin's opponent this time was the team led by the young man named Tang, who had ranked second in both the team and individual preliminary rounds. Upon seeing Lin, he looked mad, fists clenched, thinking he finally met Lin again. He is the captain of his team, a legendary profession known as a holy swordsman. The moment he stepped into the arena, the audience erupted into deafening cheers. Many had heard his name before and were speculating whether he could defeat Lin. Standing by Lin's side, Yi Yi frowned as she recognized the opponent and his profession, cautioning Lin to be careful. Lin wasn't very familiar with this profession, but wasn't overly worried either. Remembering his friend Feng, he realized that the holy swordsman seemed to be what Feng would become after his own profession elevation. After his teammates cheered for him, they once again stepped off the arena. The opponent approached Lin step by step, having heard of Lin's previous 1v5 battle, but not expecting Lin to dare to act this bold again in front of them. This made Tang take it as an insult. Turning his head, he instructed his teammates to step off the stage as well, his gaze filled with fury as he looked toward Lin, surprised and offended by Lin's apparent underestimation. Lin was puzzled by the man's hostility towards him, wondering if they had met somewhere before. Tang then drew a long sword, clearly a powerful and very valuable weapon. Tang revealed a smirk while telling Lin that he had originally hoped for a one-on-one in the singles match, but it had come sooner than expected. He had watched Lin's previous matches and acknowledged the strength of Lin's skeleton, but deemed it ineffective against him. The next second, he charged towards Lin with swift speed, so fast that the audience could barely see his figure. As the audience cheered again, excited that the match had finally started and eager to witness the holy swordsman in action, some pointed out that even among the legendary professions, the holy swordsman is up there. Perhaps Lin would have a tough time this round. Lin didn't look very concerned as he lifted his hand to summon a skeleton, but he was very interested in what Tang was capable of. Seeing how confident he was, he smiled and praised Tang, which only added fuel to the fire, making Tang feel contempt. Lin's tone seemed like he was looking down at him, which irritated him greatly. Veins bulging, he then unleashed his first skill. Seconds later, Tang's long sword was immediately surrounded by two glowing rings.